everyone. If you're just joining me for the first time, my name is Tori Capes. I'm a certified milliner, which means I design and I make hats. So usually the channel is about teaching you how to make hats too, but today I'm going to do a different project, something for the home, something that we can all use, something that you could start a sewing business with, or something that you might want to give out as gifts for this holiday season coming up. And what we're making, which is a reversible placemat. So we're going to use this loft interfacing. It's a fleece interfacing, and on one side it's fusible. So we will make it a lot easier on ourselves by fusing the one side of our placemat to the interfacing, and then we're just going to quilt on top of the other side and all the way through the layers. And well, I'll show you in a minute what I mean. So let's have some fun and make some placemats, use up some scraps. I'm going to also use my Fiskars rotary cutter, which has a built-in ruler, and this is a 45mm size blade. So I'll have links for this and the interfacing in the description below. So let's get started. Let's make some reversible placemats. So now that I have applied the one of the cotton panels to the fusible side of my interfacing, my quilting interfacing, I am just going to square off each side so that the cotton is in line with the fleece. And if I was going to do some quilting, I'd mark a center point on the middle. So I did that on a few of these pieces. I don't need it for this because I'm just going to quilt using the lines in the pattern for my main side. Now, I usually refer to the side that I just fuse on as the back side, because if I was going to quilt, I'd be doing all of that now on this next step on the other side. So with that in mind, I'm just going to take advantage of the fact that this pattern is great for a learning quilter like me. I'm just following these lines that are naturally in the pattern. It's like a Christmas sweater with cats, and it's so easy to quilt it on to my interfacing and my other piece of cotton. I'm sewing through all 3 layers, and I'll end up with these lovely quilting lines when I'm finished, which is very distinctive, and it makes it look homemade, handmade, made with love. I really do like the way that this looks, and if you don't have lines, you could just add them. So I'm using my chalk pencil with that rotary wheel on the end that just distributes a nice, crisp, small, thin line of chalk that I can see, and then just brush away when I don't need it anymore. And I'll just use the width of my ruler to put in lines, and I'm doing them vertically all the way across. And again, all the way through the layers. So this part is really easy, especially if you're just using 2 solid pieces of cotton, one on each side with the fusible fleece in between. It gets a little bit more complicated if you want to do some quilting on one side, and we'll look at that towards the end of this video. So I've added lines to the sweater print as well, just to show you once again, and you can use different colored thread if it really stands out. So now we come to the point where we want to put a binding edge on our little small mini quilt, which we call a placemat. And this size that I'm doing is about 18 by 12, so I need about 60 inches of binding to finish off or close up my edges. And I'm going to use this really cute green turquoise Christmas ball fabric that I have left over from the days when I was making fabric face masks. It's just been sitting there. To give me 60 inches of length, I needed to cut 2 strips of my 44 or 45 inch wide cotton quilting fabric. And I love this built-in rotary cutter and ruler from Fiskars because you hardly have to hold it down. It's got some weight on its own, so it doesn't shift when you're cutting, which I really appreciate for doing this kind of work. So now I'm going to just join these 2 strips together on the diagonal. And I find that's the best way to join fabric together. I do this with my hats as well. So 1 strip facing up towards me on the bottom there along the horizontal line, and the other going down the vertical lines of my cutting mat drew in that line, I've sewed it, and I leave a raw edge on either side of about 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, and I press that raw edge flat, and I've trimmed it too, so that my binding is still has a nice straight edge. Now I'm not going to try and join the two ends once I started sewing onto my placemat with a diagonal cut. I'm going to create a folded over flap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my starting point on a diagonal as well. So on the if my strip was facing down, the right side down, the higher end of my diagonal would be on the right side and the left side would be the shorter end. I'll just fold over that raw edge. And I will press that down as well. And you can just fold it over as much as you need to feel comfortable. And I'm just going to trim off that little piece, that little dog ear that's sticking out on the side. So I have a clear, straight, raw edge line on my binding. I'm a new quilter, so I find it easier to sew this binding on once it's already folded. So my wrong sides are together. And I'll press my binding in half all the way along the entire length with those wrong sides together. And now I am just placing my binding onto the right side of my placemat. And I will start by doing a small edge stitch at the beginning point, just sewing that starting point down. And I just lifting up the flap. And I'll just sew inside that flap just a little bit, just on that single layer, that lower piece of the binding. And my flap is still totally able to open, so that will come in handy when I come back around on this side after I finish doing the corners and attaching the binding to all the sides, and I put that end into that flap. And I'll cut the end on the opposite diagonal and slip it in, but I'll show you that in a minute. So I'm going to start further down from that flap opening, so I have lots of room to manipulate the end piece once I come back around. And I'll start by sewing the raw edges. I've lined them up on the side against my magnetic seam guide, and I'm sewing through all the layers. And when I get to within about 3/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch of the bottom edge of my placemat, I'm going to pivot my needle on a 45-degree angle, and I'll sew through all of those layers again and come right off of that corner of the placemat on a 45-degree angle. And just a note, if you haven't done an edge stitch all around your placemat before you started attaching this binding edge, then just make sure that that corner, those layers are smoothed out as you do this next step. So we're going to fold over our binding on a 45-degree angle. So look at the edge of the binding, the raw edge of the binding matches up or lines up in a straight line with the raw edge of the placemat, and then we're going to fold it back on top of itself. So our 45-degree fold is underneath, and we have this folded edge right in line with the raw edge of the side of the placemat that we just did. And I use a little clip to hold it in place, and then just start from the edge. You can do a back stitch too, a tacking stitch if you need to at the start, and just continue and sew the binding, the raw edges lined up on that right side, and for me against my magnetic seam guide as I come to the next corner, and then repeat. And I will just show you how I do this on all 4 corners as we work our way around the edge of the placemat. And I'm careful to line up my binding, the raw edge, with the raw edge of my placemat. And this is one of the reasons why we trim all of the layers of our placemat before we even start this step, because it just makes it so easy, much easier, and makes such a nicer finished product if all of our edges are straight and they're nice and square. And that's another reason why I love my Fiskars ruler. So, okay, I'm at the end now. And instead of joining these 2 end pieces together by cutting a diagonal and joining them that way, I'm just going to slip the end into the beginning in that pocket that we created at the very start. And I'm cutting the end on an opposite diagonal. So I have quite a long piece that's going to reach inside of my edge of my um, binding that's already in place. And I'm just using my small screwdriver to help me get that edge in. And I'm just going to tuck everything in and make sure that it's sitting nicely. And I'll use pins to help me hold that folded over pocket in place. And here's another view with a different placemat, our golden girls with some bandana edging. And you just want to smooth it down and make sure that the points where they meet on that folded edge are as close together as possible without any waving or puckering. And then you're just going to finish off by closing up that seam. And we'll just continue along that seam over that folded edge line and right back to where we started. Okay, and that's what it'll look like. And I'm just going to open it up slightly, and I see I've got some nice square corners too. And I'll take it over to my pressing mat, and I'm just going to press those sides open. I don't need to press open the corners because they'll flip nicely when I go and do this finishing step. But I'll just use my steam iron to iron those edges over, open them up. And I find this step also helps with turning over the edge because now we're going to close it up with a stitch. And to do those mitered corners, look at how nicely that works out. So you're just going to fold it up along the bottom and then fold over the side, and you get a nice little mitered corner. Now you can pin those down if you think that will help as you're sewing and doing this final step, or you can just do the fold as you approach the corner while you are sewing. And I'm getting to that point now in my quilting journey where I can do that. Now I'm going to try a compensating foot. So you can see the foot's deeper on one side than the other. And that's nice to have it right at the edge there of our binding, rather than using my magnetic seam guide, but I could do either. So if you have a compensating foot, you might prefer to use that. And you're just going to sew into that diagonal fold with your needle in pivot and come around and continue going. So once this is all folded and in place, my edges are about 3/8 of an inch wide or a centimeter wide on each side. Now I'm going to show you I'm making an extra little enhancement for my sweater placemat. I'm cutting some pieces of heat and bond, some strips, and they're an inch wide. And I'm going to just iron on that first sticky side onto the wrong side of this confetti print cotton. And I'm creating one long strip because I'm going to add a decorative touch to the top and the bottom of my sweater panel. So I'm adding a bit of applique to my placemat and my handy Fiskars cutter ruler. It's easy to pop the cutting wheel out, the straight cutter, and I'm going to replace it with one of these decorative edge cutting blades. And my Fiskars cutter is a 45 millimeter cutter, and you can put any blade in it that's 45 millimeters. It's got a magnet built in too, so it'll hold it in place while you just pop it back together and use that big nut as you reattach it to the housing that's built into this ruler. And this ruler has some weight to it. And like I said before, it's very, very easy to operate because you're not having to press down hard on a ruler to hold it in place while you're cutting. I find that just using one hand and that holds it in place. And look at this, I get a nice wavy edge. So I'm going to add this as trim to the bottom of my sweater panel and to the top. before I apply the binding. And I could have made them deeper. I mean, I did 1 inch just for the sake of this video, but I think if I do another one, which I will, I'll probably make that confetti trim a little bit deeper. But you can hold on to your offcuts because you can always use them this way as appliques on your placemats. As sure, you can quilt this on, but I'm just going to show you that you can actually use an applique method because the glue in these modern no-sew adhesives is so good now. It's really improved over the past few years that you can wash them and they stay in place as long as you follow the manufacturer's directions. And so I'm really pleased with how this just adds a little bit of fun to this side of my placemat, which I think is already fun because it's got that whole ugly sweater Christmas theme. And if I wanted to, I could make an applique of an ugly sweater to put on that side. So again, once again, I'm applying the binding edge the same way as I just showed you. So come up to the corner and fold them over so I get a 45-degree angle fold on the side I'm working on. And this time I'm using my magnetic seam guide and I'm back to my Teflon foot. So whatever you have and whatever method works best for you, there's no right or wrong way really, just as long as you're happy with the results. And so here I made some bat appliques. So I just used Canva to do some bat outlines and I just traced them on the paper side of my heat and bond. And then I cut out the bats from some scraps of cotton and doing a Halloween theme, just applying these appliques seemed to work well for me as a novice quilter. And you just use your iron to attach them, and you do this before you do the finishing binding edge. And it's fun. It turned out really well. I'm really pleased with that. And on the other side, I have a fall theme, so I can use this placemat from, September on until the snow flies. Now here I tried my hand at quilting. So I'm piecing together scraps of fabric that I have in a bag, one of many bags of scraps of fabric. And I started with a center panel and I just worked so that I'm making panels that are on the vertical, and I'm going to join them together right in place, in situ, on my placemat. Starting at the center, I centered that center panel and started sewing with the wrong side together the next strip, and I sewed through all the layers, and that's how I quilted this small little attempt to quilt into place. And have fun with this. I mean, it was so much fun to make this video. I really learned a lot about quilting. I learned that I still have a lot to learn. But this one was lots of fun to make. And if I'm going to see you at any craft festivals this fall, then perhaps you're going to see one of these popped into your bag. And so, I start at the center and I just work my way to the edge on both sides, one side at a time. And then I did top stitch just beside the seam as well. And this one I cut into strips. Even though I could have used this as one piece, I did cut into strips as I was learning how to do this method. So you can do that too, just to add some quilting interest to your placemat. And here are the spoon flower designs that I used. They're really cute. It's petal signature cotton. There are so many great designs on spoon flower. I use spoon flower a lot. I like supporting these small independent artists that come up with these designs. So there they are. And here are my placemats. Ready to work hard, keeping our table protected. And you can use either side. I like to have one side sort of plain and really not too festive so that it can outlast the season. But you can make these placemats just in fun flower fabrics or whatever you want to do. It's just great. I've got the fall and the Christmas thing going here. And I have a feeling I'm going to be doing these for years to come. Just for fun and family, and to give out as gifts to favorite customers. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm back to making hats. We have some new patterns coming up soon. So if you're enjoying these projects and you want to learn more about making hats, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't subscribed. And thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your ongoing support. We really appreciate it. That helps us make these videos. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're Madcap Hats there. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you again soon. My name is Tori Capes. I'm a certified milliner. Thank you so much for watching.